Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Today, I spoke with a returning guest, Dr. Anbar, who originally came on because of his book, Life Guide for Teens. And yeah, we had a brief overview of that, but I was just fascinated to talk to him more about hypnosis. And it was a brilliant conversation. I loved it. I hope you enjoy it as well. Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. I'm delighted to have you on, and thank you very much for agreeing to come back. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back.
You're welcome. And before we get into my list of questions, could we just remind people, because originally I spoke to you because you were talking about your book, The Life Guide for Teens, and could you just give a brief of what that is again and how you came to write it?
Sure. So I'm a pediatric pulmonologist, lung doctor, who 27 years ago fell into the world of hypnosis, because one of my terribly allergic patients, he was very allergic to milk products, told me that when he smells cheeseburgers, he developed an asthma attack. And when I asked him to imagine eating a cheeseburger, he developed an asthma attack. And I said, whoa, you can think of an illness and make yourself sick? And then the question immediately came to mind is, if you can think your way into an illness, can you think your way out? And that was my rather dramatic introduction into the world of hypnosis. I then did this for 15 years. I was a pulmonologist and taught self-regulation, self-hypnosis to my patients, because I found that the majority of people with chronic illness can benefit by regulating their emotions. In other words, a lot of times our symptoms are made worse or better depending on our emotional state. So hypnosis, which means using your imagination to help yourself, can help change the nature of your symptoms. So sometimes resolve them depending on what they are. And so after doing that for 15 years, my wife said she no longer wanted to live in Syracuse, New York, which is a very snowy part of the United States. And we decided to move to the nicest place in the United States, in my opinion, La Jolla, California. And I opened up a full-time practice doing hypnosis and counseling for children, adolescents, and young adults. And I've been doing that now for more than 10 years. And as a result of that practice, I've learned a lot from my patients. And I wrote the book, The Life Guide for Teens, that describes many of the skills I've taught my patients, not just hypnosis skills, but different skills they can use to regulate their anxiety, pain, to do better in school, to do better in sports, the stuff that teenagers tend to deal with.
And so, going with that, where or how would you describe the difference between the mind and the subconscious mind? Or how would you describe it?
Well, great question. In fact, I'm writing a third book now called Interviews with the Subconscious.
Well, I'm going to have to get you back on to talk about that book as well then.
Yes, but that's going to take me 2 or 3 years. It's a long process to get a book out. But all right, we've got a mind, and the mind is separated, in my mind, these two major parts: the conscious self and the subconscious self. So the subconscious self is everything in your mind that you're not aware of, and that includes the part of your mind that controls your breathing and your heart, and what we call the autonomic nervous system. Some people call that the unconscious as opposed to the subconscious, but I just call everything below conscious awareness subconscious. But the subconscious also contains a lot of information and knowledge and wisdom that the conscious is not aware of. And the reason for that is that our conscious brain can only handle so many things at once. And so if we get too much stuff, we become overwhelmed. In fact, people with autism, I think, have a hard time filtering out a lot of the stuff that comes at us, and this is why they sometimes shut down.
Yeah.
So, for example, you may not be aware, the listener may not be aware of how the shoes feel on their feet if you have shoes on right now, because you're not paying attention to it.
Yeah.
But somebody with autism might be acutely aware of that, and aware of every little ticking noise, and that's why they get overwhelmed. So the subconscious mind filters information and presents to the conscious mind what the conscious mind can handle. However, the subconscious mind therefore knows a lot more information than we do, consciously. And when you gain access to it, or you access its abilities, then you get some pretty amazing progress, which is what hypnosis allows to do.
So how when you're tuned in, for want of a better term, when you're tuned into that subconscious mind, how powerful can positive talk be?
It can be tremendously powerful. A positive talk, positive thoughts, positive intentions, they all overlap, set the stage for the reality we create for ourselves. Remember, our perception of reality is a perception. It's not real, whatever real is. Even things like basic things like color. Do you realize that color does not exist in the real universe?
I didn't know that. No.
What we perceive as color is light particles
Yes.
coming at a certain wavelength, and our brain changes that wavelength into a color.
Yes.
The same is true of sound. Sound does not exist out there either, because sound waves, our brain translates into noise. So what we perceive as real is something our brain makes of what's out there. Okay. So when we look at the world in a particular way, the world appears to us in that way. So a simple example, if you think the world is out to get you, that's your attitude, you will find evidence for that. When your cup is half full, you'll see it as half empty and say, this is unfair. But if you look at the universe as benign and as helpful in guiding you, you'll see it half full. I'm so lucky to have a half full cup. That's a very typical example, half empty, half full. So how our attitude, how we look at things, shapes our reality. And I've learned to be really positive, and hence I live in a wonderful universe, wonderful world. Feel guided, feel lucky. Every day I'm lucky. I'm lucky to talk to you right now, to spread the word. So lucky, right? But if I was a negative person, I would say, oh, I had to get up early, and this is such a chore, and it's hard to sell books, and nobody's hearing me, and I could talk myself down. And that's by the way, people with depression and anxiety all often talk themselves down. The anxious person, oh, things might go really bad. The depressed person, things will never get better, and that becomes their reality. And that's how you manifest reality, based on your attitude.
So when you describe manifest reality, so if you were able to train your brain to wake up every morning and, for want of a better term, just say the universe is trying to reward me every day. The universe is always looking for ways to reward me, because reward me could be a free cup of coffee when you turn up at your favourite coffee shop. Do you know what I mean? Or a compliment when you're walking down the road. Does that literally, in that literal sense, start training yourself to see those things happening as opportunities as such?
Exactly right. And I wouldn't say the universe is trying. I would say the universe is doing it. Well, trying.
When I said trying, I realised I'm talking to a hypnotherapist. I shouldn't have used the word trying. So, that's a good point. Explain to people why when hypnotherapists use the word trying or try.
Well, trying shouldn't be reserved just for hypnotherapists. All of us should avoid using the word try. Master Yoda said from Star Wars, do or do not, there is no try.
Yeah.
Why? When you try something, you leave room for failure.
Yes.
If you think about it, when you say I tried something in the past, you usually mean I did not succeed. Why move forward with a chance of not succeeding? I teach my patients, and for myself, I do things. Sometimes I really have great outcomes. Sometimes I don't have a great outcome. When I don't have a great outcome, I learn from it. So I'm always a winner. Whatever happens, I feel good. The reverse, again, we'll talk about the depressed or anxious person. Something good happens, they say, well, it was supposed to happen anyway. If I was, everybody can do this. And if something bad happens, see, I'm no good. So the same events could be looked at in a different way depending on your state of mind. But yes, you can definitely start off the day and say, today I'm going to look for my rewards from the universe, and you'll find them. And I learned, once I learned that skill, it used to be if the day starts off badly, I forgot something at home, I lost something, I would say to myself, oh no, it's one of those days. And the days were quite negative. Lots of bad things happen. But now, since I learned about positivity, the day starts off badly. I said, I'm going to make it a good day.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a good day.
It is, isn't it? That there is that funny thing that, and I've done this with my own clients sometimes, where I remind them that because you got cut up at a park in the car park, or you lost that parking space, you were maybe at best, if you actually hit a stopwatch, you were maybe at best inconvenienced for 5 minutes. 5 minutes that were not life important, but you're still talking about it 48 hours later, and it should never have had that impact on the energy that you're holding, that life, the narration that you're telling yourself, because you've literally you're still living in that space of 5 minutes of inconvenience, and every day you've repeated that story to somebody, you've just put yourself right back at that place last Tuesday.
Right, with all the bad feeling that came along with it.
Yeah, and it's very difficult. So for people listening, because I think a lot of us can be guilty of that negative self-talk, where we find ourselves, like I said, just remunerating time and time and time again about an inconvenience at best. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, the car park was full, or somebody pinched your favourite place, or got there before you. And how would you encourage them to get out of that way of thinking?
Well, first of all, they need to understand that, again, they create their realities, which means that if they complain about the world being unfair, they'll find evidence that the world is unfair, and they'll say, see, I was right. Right? And that's how you create a negative reality. So they have to be aware that that's what's going on. And how do you encourage them? You tell them, you explain to them that positive talk leads positive results. I teach my patients that when they say they're strong, they can become stronger. When they say they're weak, they become weaker. And I demonstrate it to them by pushing on their arm, if the outstretched arm, that they are supposed to resist me. They say I'm weak, they get weak. So the patients get it, that what they say affects them. And then I say, so when you catch yourself complaining or feeling the world is unfair, tell yourself how you want it to be. I want the world to be fair. I want to feel better. I want my life to be in better shape. And encourage them to keep telling themselves that. Now, sometimes adults have a harder time breaking the habit of negativity. Remember, they live their whole life this way.
Yeah.
So, and that's their reality. So to break reality, it's sort of like in the Matrix. You have to take the red pill and see it in a different way. But I have seen patients turn it around. You know, I'm lucky. I work with teenagers. They're all about change, so they can accept what I have to say maybe more easily than somebody who's been doing something for 50 years.
Yeah.
But there's a Dr. Michael Yapko, is a very famous psychologist here in Southern California, and he talks about how people make themselves depressed. And this negative talk is how they do it. And rather than spending a lot of time on discussing what made them depressed and how badly they feel about it, which a lot of people just want to talk about how badly they feel, it gets you nowhere. He focuses on how they feel this way and then how they can feel better.
Okay, so in some senses, it's effectively the echo chamber you create for yourself. And can that
Correct.
echo chamber then kind of decides the feedback loop that you receive?
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned echo chamber, because that, of course, reminds us of social media.
Yeah.
And social media is an echo chamber, and it has an algorithm that feeds you what you expect. And social media, I think, has made things a lot worse. Because if you're in a poor state of mind, you'll find lots of support for that kind of thinking on social media, especially with kids that I know about. I mean, there's social media sites that say it's good to be depressed. It's good to have depressive thinking because you're more realistic, and they give you all this stuff, and kids are listening and they believe it, and that becomes their reality. So we have to be very, very careful to recognize when we are in an echo chamber, either through social media or in ourselves. And again, understand that you can break out of it. Sometimes it helps to have a therapist.
Yeah.
Sometimes it helps to surround yourself with positive people and listen to them. Because one of the things that negative people will do is somebody will say, "Oh, you're handsome," and immediately answer, "No, I'm not." Or you're just saying that.
Yeah.
Or, "Oh, you're smart." "No, I'm not. I'm stupid." They negate it. And so what I teach my, again, adolescents is, if somebody says you're smart and you don't believe you're smart, tell yourself, "I want to be smarter," which is generally true. And that'll work just as well as saying, "I am smart," because you want to be positive. You want to give yourself the right message.
So, in terms of, like, we already mentioned to people that the interesting thing about the word try or trying is it implies the potential to failure, which I suppose comes around to setting a good intention from the beginning. And what words are useful for people to use?
In terms of taking on a new endeavor, I'm going to do this to the best of my ability. I'm looking forward to learning. I understand that the bigger the challenge, the more effort I'll need to put in, and that's fine. That's a good thing. When you looking to move forward, accept that sometimes things don't turn out the way you want them to turn out, but sometimes they turn out even better. So I think it was Benjamin Franklin said, "When one door closes, another opens." But so many people just looked at the closed door, they missed the open door.
Yeah.
So when something bad happens, or something doesn't work out the way you want, just look for another door. I had a 10-year-old in my office recently. I was so proud of him. He said, "I tried out for my travel baseball league and I was not selected. But I said to myself, I'm really proud of how hard I played. I'll do it next year, and now I have more time to spend with my friends this year. I'm so happy."
Yeah.
And I said, "Gosh, you got it." That's how you interpret something that looks to be negative, but it's actually a positive.
It's that kind of I think something that happens over the years is things become buzzwords, don't they? And I mean, it's the classic reframing things. Like you were saying,
Right.
if you've got something that's potentially difficult coming up, it's literally sitting yourself down and saying, there's going to be times when this is going to be harder than I want it to be, and there's times it's going to be easier when I want it to be. But the end result is I'm going to learn a lot along the way, and it's going to be a great experience. But that's really saying this is going to be really hard, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Not necessarily. I think you can
But it's
say
interpretation.
Yeah, well, depending on your attitude.
Yes.
Because I would say if something is hard, or I would use the word challenging, that's an opportunity to learn. That's when you learn.
Yeah.
I talk to athletes all the time. If you are the top athlete on your team, you always score a goal or hit a run, whatever the sport you're in, and that's what happens all the time. Find yourself a better league. Find yourself a place where you do struggle, because in the struggle is where you learn. You learn most outside of your comfort zone. If you're very comfortable, there's no need to do anything different. And if you're an athlete who wants to become a superstar, you want difficult circumstances, because that's how you're going to grow. And if you want to become a businessman, you want difficult circumstances because you want to know how to handle them, because there's going to be difficult times in your career and you want to know you can handle them. If I'm hiring someone for my business, do I want somebody who's always succeeded and never was challenged? Or do I want somebody who's been challenged multiple times, failed a couple of times, had to bring themselves back? Who am I going to trust more? I'm going to take the one who knows how they bounce back. There's some people out there who don't know how to deal with adversity, and you don't know if they've never had adversity. You have no idea if they can deal with it.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Could we just cover a little bit on the purpose of intention? I was about to say the power of intention, but again, I think that's an overused phrase, because it's really what the purpose of intention is.
Well, I guess the bigger question is, what's the purpose of life? What are we doing here? Because that's going to answer what purpose of intent. So my answer is, the purpose of life is to be kind and helpful to each other. And by the way, in the subconscious interviews that I told you about, I interviewed 24 of my patients with existential questions, which I'll talk about in my next book. But one of the questions is, what's the purpose of life? And the majority said kindness and being helpful to each other and love. And that's the purpose. So, and I believe that even before these interviews. So, if that's your purpose, then your intent is to exude kindness and love to your fellow people. And then you use the tools you have, whatever, if you're a writer, if you're a businessman, if you're a doctor, if you're a teacher, whatever you're doing, the intent is to permit yourself to be an instrument in that goal of being kind and helpful.
Yeah. So, when, what do you think trips people up the most?
That's a really big question. I think people get tripped up by confusing reality for what we just see and what we're told it is. In other words, like I like to tell patients, once you understand yourself, once you understand your subconscious, understand your motivations, you can manifest your whole being. And I think it was a Roman emperor said, the one who conquers himself is mightier than anybody who conquers other cities, which I think is true. I don't know if it was Marcus Aurelius. Don't remember who said that. But people who just forget their inner self and just live their life the way they consciously feel, follow temptations, look at material things as important, like money is important, or showing off to other people is important, or being powerful is important. They get lost. So I think that is probably the biggest thing that trips people up. They don't realize their full breadth. They don't understand their role. They don't understand the purpose of life. They don't even think about it. And that's, I think, what trips a lot of people up.
Yeah, it's you say we kind of get like wrapped up in perceptions, don't we, of how it should be or how lucky we should be, and we never. I think sometimes this is where there is a validity in when people say you should have a little gratitude session on a daily basis.
Correct. Gratitude implies you understand that you're given opportunities. I think in the old days, religion played a much bigger role to try to fill that niche. Okay, so you're born as a child, don't know anything, you sort of figure out how things go. And if you look at young kids, they just do whatever they feel like, don't really think about it. Then you become an adolescent, and you become more aware, which is when a lot of my patients become anxious because they're often aware of things they don't know how to handle. And if they're caring, loving individuals, they get anxious because they realize they're powerless or bad things are happening that they never thought about before. And then hopefully as you become an adult, you realize that you have some control over yourself and how to manifest what we're talking about. But how do you teach that to the adolescent? So religion used to do that. Religion said, well, God put you on earth for a reason, follow God's ways, and you can, even without understanding, you sort of have a purpose now. Your purpose is to follow God's ways. But as you know, large sections of the world don't believe in God, don't believe in religion anymore. And it hasn't been replaced effectively. The government in socialist countries, in communist countries, dictatorships, the government sets the rules. But rightfully so, the government doesn't know everything, so government is people. So yeah. People, I don't think give it the same weight. And so we have a lot of lost people who know something's missing, but don't know quite what is missing and how to replace it. And that's my goal, is to teach people about the power within their subconscious. And when you gain access to your subconscious and you ask these existential questions, which I did, that's where the book is coming from, what's my purpose? You'll get answers. I should give a caveat. I know about the subconsciouses of people who talk to me. I've talked to thousands of subconscious over the years. The 24 I mentioned are the ones I start asking existential questions of, like, what's love? Is there God? That kind of question. And usually I don't ask those questions because they're not therapeutically necessary. But when I talk about the subconscious, I'm talking about the people who have interacted with me. it's perfectly possible that there are subconscious minds out there that are very different from the ones I'm describing, that maybe are negative or destructive. I don't know, because if they don't want to interact with me,
Yeah.
I don't know about them. So this is true of all science, by the way. You can only describe what you've observed. You can't describe things you have not observed.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't really look at things that way, do we? We don't understand that kind of way. How would you, if people are listening and they want exercises to try and exercises to learn and put into practice, say like a daily practice, because they want to understand their subconscious better and how to use it as a tool for themselves, what would you suggest?
So I would point out that we hear subconscious all the time. Like sometimes we talk about the conscience. You're about to do something wrong and you hear a voice saying, don't do that. That's from the subconscious. We see evidence of subconscious, like when we walk and we don't think about walking, the subconscious is walking for you. When you're getting a gut feeling, that typically is from the subconscious. So if you want to hear your subconscious better, it's important to have a little bit of quiet time to reflect, to ponder where you're at. And again, in today's society, one of the problems is you have some quiet time, you pick up your phone, play a game, or text somebody. You don't give yourself that breathing space. So first, give yourself some free time. Next, you could do something like walk out in nature and just let your thoughts go, and you'll get some subconscious thoughts. You can ask your subconscious a question. You can say, hey, tell me what I should do. Should I trust this person? And then just listen for an answer. I remember when I was 24, way before I even knew about the subconscious as entity, I was really struggling with a personal issue, and I sat in front of the keyboard, I typed question, and an answer came to me. Typed question, answer came to me. I think that was from my subconscious, because it was like novel to me. You could do something like that. One time I went to Big Sur, which is a national park here on the West Coast, and I looked for a spiritual experience out in nature. It was an interesting experiment because I didn't think I found much. And I have spiritual experience with my patients every day. Yeah. So I'm half the day I'm having existential talk or feeling strong connection or love with my patients, and vice versa. It's a wonderful time, wonderful vocation I have. But I decided to talk to a tree. So I put my hand on this big, giant redwood, and I decided to give it some energy. Again, it's mumbo jumbo if you like, yeah. But I imagine energy coming to me into the tree. And then I heard the tree speak to me. The tree said, I don't take energy. I give energy. I collect it from the sun and I give it to people. I give it to animals and people. I said, okay, so I accepted energy from the tree. Now that came, I believe, through my subconscious. Did I really hear the tree? That's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
But it came through my subconscious. So the way you hear your subconscious is open yourself up to hearing from yourself in different ways. You can go to a mountain and just observe the beauty, and thoughts will come to you. The main thing is don't force it, and don't imagine what my subconscious is telling me here. Don't so take little work, little effort. Just let it happen. And in time, you'll hear that voice. I've asked my patients, how do you know it's your subconscious speaking? And some of them will say, well, it comes in a different voice. Or it tells me things that I find surprising. The Bible talks about the subconscious a bit. There's a story of Elijah, who was a prophet, who is who earned the ire of King Ahab, because he said to Ahab, you're a bad person, God doesn't like you. So Ahab wanted to kill him. Elijah runs off, and he hides in his cave. And then it says God came, and there was an earthquake, and a fire, and a flood. And in the Bible it says, but God was not in a fire. God was not in an earthquake. God was not in a flood. He came in a quiet, still voice, which to me means subconscious.
Yeah.
And one other historical reference, Socrates talked about his inner daemon, Daemon, who Socrates lived 2,500 years ago. This was a voice inside him that told him things. That's subconscious.
It's interesting you were saying about no distractions, because I've recently found, and I was talking to a friend about this today, I've recently found myself driving a lot more, just for no reason than I want to drive. I want to go for a drive. The vehicle I drive is a 1988 Land Rover 90. It has no heating, no radio, no clock, no power steering. It's as agricultural as you can get, and the only noise it has is the noise of the engine and the fact that there's not much between you and the ground. And obviously it's a four-wheel drive, so I can drive and go off-road, and I don't do anything severe. I'm not trying to, but I can just go down what we call green lanes, which are just, tracks that are occasionally used. But I don't see anyone, and I don't hear anything other than nature. But more than anything, there's nothing in the car that can distract me. I just have to, the only thing I can do is look ahead, is just pay attention to my driving. And all I've noticed is that I've been doing it more and more. And I've only had the car since January. And I was just like, oh yeah, I'm almost putting myself into, I'm looking forward to the boredom. And I think it's because it's the first time in a long time that I'm aware that, oh right, I'm not actually doing anything. And my brain gets a chance to just shut off, and everything else gets a chance to come in. That's
a power of meditation, right? The meditation traditionally is focus on one thing, like your breathing or a mantra, and let everything else go. So it's the same kind of principle. And I'll tell you something important here. The subconscious can take effect and help you even when you're not aware of it. So the subconscious is not just things you're aware of. It's obviously, well, by definition, it's things you're not aware of typically. And when you trust yourself, you can allow your subconscious to help you out even if you don't know what's going on. With hypnosis, I've seen that in action. So sometimes I will talk to patients' subconscious about a particular topic. When they come out of hypnosis, they have no recollection of it. But then changes happen. And I know why changes happen because I've discussed it with the subconscious. But the patients have no clue. When I'm particularly close with a patient, we can sit in the same room, we can stare at each other, it's really comfortable, and say nothing, and something is going on. I don't know what's going on, but it feels good, and I'm sure it's happening on a subconscious level. So, in our society, if there's silence between two people, that's often awkward. People want to fill it with words and stuff. Honoring the subconscious, being able to sit in silence together and let whatever happens, happens. You can also sit in silence by yourself, but it's really cool to do with somebody else and see how it feels. I guess monks do that, right? Monks will go years without talking. The same kind of idea.
It is, isn't it? Because this is, I remember saying to somebody years and years ago about meditation, and it was at a time when I was really into it myself, and I'd been doing guided meditation recordings for people and stuff like that. And I tried to explain to people that meditation is just single thought. So I said, if you can go and play a round of golf, if for that round of golf you're not distracted by anything other than what you're doing, the swing, the ball, and you find yourself completely in tune with that, so don't try anything else. There's your meditation. Do that as often as you can. It could be reading a book. If you are able to completely engross yourself in the book only, read more books. I think there's this almost human desire to ignore what we find works for us and look for a solution somewhere else. We can almost be scattergun in our approach to things.
It's interesting you said single thought, because James Braid in the 19th century, who coined the term hypnosis. Hypnosis means a type of sleep. Okay. And he quickly realized... What's that?
I just said, okay, yeah, I didn't know that's where the word came from.
Yes, but James Braid realized quickly it's not sleep. He wanted to rename it monoideism. single idea, monoidism.
Yeah.
But that name didn't stick, so we have a misnomer.
I didn't know that. But that hypnosis it suits it though. It does suit it though. I think it's one of those because regardless, I remember it was one of the first things they taught us when I qualified when I trained to be a hypnotherapist. Is there's no such thing as we're not putting you to sleep. But the problem is it's what everyone associates it with, so we keep using the word. Which again, okay, highlights how powerful word association is. If somebody believes it so intently, well, okay, let's just stick with sleep, because everyone thinks that they're going to sleep, and it's actually the complete opposite. It's extremely hard to explain to people that have never been hypnotized. You actually, in some respects, couldn't be more awake. It's interesting.
You're actually more aware, especially if you're in touch with your subconscious.
Yeah.
You're more aware than ever.
Yeah,
but you may be cutting off external input, but you're getting internal. And since we're mentioning that, I want to tell you that my understanding is that the subconscious world has access to beyond the individual. Carl Jung, the famous psychotherapist, talked about universal unconscious or collective unconscious, which he had a theory of archetypes. So we're all born with the same kind of basic subconscious understandings. I don't agree with that. I don't view it that way. I think that the subconscious realm includes what we call paranormal stuff, including picking up on feelings of other people, picking up on knowledge or wisdom from other sources. The Greek concept of muses. I've seen patients who compose, who write, who channel information. And, great writers, great composers, poets talk about channeling, that stuff pours out of them. I think that comes through the subconscious, but I don't think it's from the subconscious. I think like I've had young teenagers writing really good music or really nice poetry that they said poured out of them. I don't believe they have the knowledge to do that. Mozart started composing when he was 3. I have a patient in my clinic who started composing when she was 5. These aren't well-educated people, no, but they have the ability, and I think it channels through the subconscious.
I wrote a book a little over 10 years ago now, so it's probably about 12, 13 years ago, and it's about reincarnation. I wrote this book about reincarnation, and I wasn't trying to write a book in any way, shape or form about reincarnation. I spent a few years at writing classes, script writing and all of that, and I'm trying to write something like, for 30, 40-year-olds, divorced, single, kind of my era, my friends, something that'd be cool and trendy. No matter how many times I tried to write something, nothing would come out. And I ended up writing this book about reincarnation. And one of the things I wrote in the foreword of the book at the beginning is, I don't need anyone to believe this process. I don't. But I'm just acknowledging this is how it happened. I would find myself sometimes when I was writing, I would just be in a strange flow state. Not every time, but large parts of the book were a strange flow state, which I'd never felt building up to that. And I would see I can't articulate it, so I apologize that this is clumsy, but there was a space somewhere above me where I could see, I think it was 7 figures talking into like a well, and that was connected to me, and I was effectively writing what they were explaining, and I don't know how else to articulate it. The only caveat I would add to that is the problem with the experience is it didn't come in words, that in the way that I articulate. It's almost like words are so limited that it came in a form of feelings, expressions, pictures, sounds, but not words. And I don't, I know when people, I've explained to people and people just like, you're talking shit. It's like, no, that they were writing, or they weren't writing through me, but they were the ones narrating what was happening. So lovely experience. I think it was and it would never last more than a couple of hours, and after that I'd be quite tired. And again, you had to be quiet though to hear them. Mm-hmm. I think that
Um, I believe it comes through your subconscious as opposed to just a feature of your own mind. And the skeptics will say, "Oh, that's hallucination, or that's just in your mind." But what convinced me, well, two things. What convinced me is a young man I met at the age of 14 who saw Hebrew in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
He is a Christian boy whose entire religious education was happy Jesus stories in Sunday school, and yet he saw Hebrew and he couldn't read it, but he could point to what he was seeing on a Google letter chart that I showed him, and I knew exactly what he was saying because I'm a native Hebrew speaker. And this happened on 3 different occasions. And I said, there's no way this boy ever studied it. There's no way this subconscious has learned this language. And he says he was a reincarnated rabbi. That's what he thinks. I thought there's some repository out there where he's getting the information. We might both be right. But those kind of experiences, and I have quite a few of those, make me believe that there's something out there. Now, just like you said, when you tell these stories to people, and I'm going to tell lots of these stories in my new book. I've kept them out of my first 2 books, Changing Children's Lives with Hypnosis and The Life Guide for Teens, because they're hard to believe, these stories. But I think they need to be told. And what I'm going to write in my book is that I don't expect you to believe that this is true. However, what I hope will happen is be aware people have such experiences, and actually lots of reports in world history of people with such experiences. And here's ways to develop it for yourself, such as by listening to your subconscious and asking yourself the same questions. I'm going to talk about tools to do that, and some of the tools I described for you today. And I was recently telling this 11-year-old boy one of the stories about the Hebrew, and I told him exactly what I said to you. I don't expect you to believe this is true, but I hope you'll keep an open mind. And then this 11-year-old said, well, I've had visions. I said, of course. What are they? Well, God talked to me and told me I was really special. I said, well, you are. And so he's already had those experiences. And I think by opening up, I've found that maybe a quarter of the kids I talk to will endorse hallucination or endorse experiences that are not of this world. So it's not uncommon. But most of them, they don't want to talk about it because people say you're crazy. Yeah. But I think it's a lot more common than people realize. And in certain cultures, like in India, American Eskimos, it's accepted that spirits are all around us. Reincarnation is accepted as normal. And a boy will say, oh, I remember in my last life I was this person. Then they get the families together and have a big celebration. So there are cultures around the world where it's not such a mystery thing. But in our Western world, we think, oh, they're crazy. It's really, really interesting. If you take a look back in history, 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, these were prophets.
Yeah.
People who heard such things, right? And then they were witches and put to death. And then they were insane and put in an insane asylum. And now they're crazy or schizophrenic and we put them on antipsychotics. People like this have been here among us all along. And I believe from engaging with some of these folks, there's a sense, rhyme and a reason. So I've had patients who have seen demons and the devil and negative influences. And generally, if I interact through the patient with the entity, there's a logic to it, and it can make it go away or make it into some. One of the things I found out that things that appear evil are usually not. Okay. And usually there's a message they're trying to convey to you. Now, again, I want to give you the limit that I only know about the people I've interacted with. But in general, again, the universe, in my mind, is helpful and wants our good, including when it sends bad images. One last thing on that. As you mentioned earlier, our brains are limited. It was hard to put into words what these 7 figures were telling you. So the way I understand things is a realm out there that some people are able to see into, and you included. And then our brains perceive that realm based on our ability to experience things. So you might see the same thing I do, and you'll call it Jesus or an angel or a demon or an alien. And we might be seeing all the same thing, but how we're interpreting is based on our limited brain ability.
Yeah, I worked in a day center for adults with various different conditions, learning disabilities and stuff like that. And by no means was it all of them, but there were 2 in particular And when they used to have conversations with people, there was nobody there. But if you observed them, they were having a conversation. They weren't talking to the wind. They were having a conversation with somebody. And the reason I'm so convinced of that is because there were people there that obviously had mental health problems, and when they started talking or shouting, there was a difference between the two. And there was one guy in particular, and if you watched him when he started talking, you could easily think there's somebody behind the door next to him that he's talking to, and it's hard to explain to people, but it's very difficult to fake a conversation and make it look real for a sustained period of time. But like the way that you and I are just talking across Zoom, if you were able to film both of us, but remove the other person, somebody else would be like, well, no, they're talking. He's talking to somebody, and it's very hard to fake that over a long period of time.
Right, and what I do with such people is I will ask the patient, the client, to ask a question of whoever they're talking with, and I will have a conversation with that unseen entity and help the patient work out their issues. Usually the unseen entity is there to help, in my experience.
Yeah.
And then find out what it wants, address it, and typically that will stop if the entity is not just like a guardian angel kind of thing. Usually, in my experience, entities have a message, want to teach something, and want the patient to do something for them. So once you fulfill that, entities stop. So if somebody is disturbed by this kind of interaction, what I have found is oftentimes with logic and compassion and love, you can get them beyond that.
Yes, it's interesting. It's love is. I don't know when you just said that about with compassion and love. I do think that something humans underestimate is the power of feeling loved, feeling appreciated. We undervalue what that means to us.
Well, first of all, love is critical to life. So if a parent doesn't love their child, if a mother especially doesn't love their baby, the baby could die.
Yeah.
Love is that feeling, that connection is critical to life. As is, by the way, touch. Touch also undervalued in our Western society. If a premature baby is not touched, they die.
That's good.
And I found touch to be a very potent way of allowing people to express themselves. As I said, the subconscious have taught me that love is the key. Love defined as connection, responsibility, respect, wanting to help. Those are elements of love. Now, there's many kinds of love. We often think of romantic love, but there's brotherly love, there's paternal love, there's self-love, there's love of God. Okay, but all those loves encompass those keys I told you about. And I've learned to tell my patients I love them, which I mean I'm connected to you, and I will do anything within my realm to help you. That's what love's about, is you want to help the patients. And the patients have learned to say that back. And I think it's really good, because that's part of our role as humans, I believe, is to spread love, to spread connection. And yes, it's undervalued, and I think it's because people are selfish and thinking about themselves, and again lose the main purpose. We talked about it earlier, how people get lost, and that's why I think they tend to devalue love.
I think we don't know how to express it outside of romantic love, because romantic love is incredibly easy, because it normally starts with a crush or some lust, and it then dies down and turns into love. So we can easily project our feelings for romantic love, whereas outside of that, paternal love, brotherly love, just compassion, simple compassion, we can often just feel embarrassed if we try and express it towards somebody.
There is some of that, and I think part of it is that people think, oh, if I express it, they'll think it's romantic.
Yeah.
Like, I think you and I love each other at some level because we
Yeah.
connected really well the first time we talked.
Yeah.
And and you know, I love a lot of people. I That's one of my capacities to love people. And it took me many years to understand that's what it was. Um, I'm hoping to teach the younger generation that that's what life's about. It'll give them, they can have 80 years of spreading love, if you would. Um, but yeah, so for your listeners, um, saying you love someone means you're really connected. You really want to help them. And I've found for myself that I love, I feel most connected with people who feel connected to me. So it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And to me, that's part of connection. But imagine a world where we all loved each other. Wouldn't that be a very different world?
It is, isn't it? I've always been a proponent of high self-esteem because I've always said, I've always had this belief that the people with the highest self-esteem, which is effectively self-love, also have the best boundaries without ever taking offence. They're able to balance both. They're not offended by people, but they're really good with personal boundaries. And it comes from that deep-rooted self-love.
Correct, because you're going to respect yourself. You're not going to not going to please somebody else for their sake. You're going to respect yourself. Exactly right. So I think that feeling good about yourself is not selfish. That's another myth, right? Taking care of yourself is the right thing to do, but not at the expense of others. And then interacting with others, being aware that the importance of connection is how we move forward in this world in a very good way.
Well, because I do believe that if everybody, if we had some kind of massive paradigm shift and everybody overnight woke up tomorrow morning wherever they are in the world and had this incredible self-love for each other, but for themselves, starting with themselves, it would immediately expand to other people. Toxic relationships would just finish because two people who aren't compatible would just acknowledge that without any hardship, and you would probably end up with world peace by the end of the week because everybody would be like, why are we fighting? This isn't in our interests. We can resolve this.
I just had another podcaster interviewed me that I clicked with, and now we've done a couple of podcasts together, and we've also, he's much younger than I am, so I've taken him on. Became his mentor, because that's a nice role as you get older, mentor for young people. And we've been talking, and he says to me, I don't mean to offend, but here's my question. And I said, why do you keep saying I don't mean to offend? I said, you can't offend me. You cannot offend me. You could tell me you hate Jews. I'm Jewish. I wouldn't be offended. I would want to know why you feel that way, but I would want to help you through that kind of feeling. You cannot offend me. I love you. And he said, well, in his generation, people get offended really easily, and that's why he prefaces. And I said, well, yeah. So that is a true thing about Gen Z, that people get offended easily, and we need to get beyond that. Because if people loved themselves and loved each other, there would be no offense. You could say an unkind comment, and I would say, why did you make that comment? Let me understand your feeling. Let me help you maybe change. I have people in my practice. I love talking politics. I love talking politics with people who don't agree with me. Yeah. Because when we still love each other and we can disagree, that's very powerful. Imagine how the world would be if we could love each other despite our differences.
One of the principles when I started this podcast was to always try, pardon the pun, right? But the goal, the intention was always to find common ground, not where we divide. So I might disagree with somebody on something, but my intention is always to find to what point do we agree, and then where can we bridge the gap, and because there are just going to be things that we disagree on, but surely the important things is to understand that we agree on 98% of all the other things.
Correct. And we agree to talk together.
Yeah.
We agree to sit around, we Zoom together or talk around the same table. I don't do marriage counseling, but a lot of poor marriages because people are focusing on the negatives. I
Yeah.
don't like your bad habit. You don't change for me. But if instead they focus on what they have in common, again, it's intention and
Yeah.
reframing, then it's a happier marriage. No marriage is perfect, as you know.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that people miss some basic steps that, like if somebody's listening, you're having difficulty with your partner. It's really a useful exercise for you and your partner to sit back and just have a conversation about what we first liked when we saw each other. Rekindle that deep set memory and say, well, the first time I met you, or the first time I saw you, the first time we kissed, our first day, what was it that attracted you to that person? And focus on those qualities, and you will end up reliving that memory if you truly engage in it. And it's not going to resolve all of your issues, but what you're going to bring to the surface is, oh, actually, I kind of like this person. I've just forgotten about it.
Right. But that being said, I would tell you some people get married for the wrong reason.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So if you got married because you were lustful for each other, and you got married in Las Vegas and one of those happy, quick marriages thing, and it's not going to last because lust doesn't last, as you alluded to earlier. So, sometimes you might be married to the wrong partner, and if you really think about it, you realize that. And then you could argue maybe this isn't worth salvaging, depending on the situation.
But that's a good place to start, though, because if you both realise actually we didn't get married for the right reasons, you actually, again, like, you've then bridged the gap and you've both actually found common ground. We didn't do this for the right reasons, did we? Right, well, maybe the right way is to stop hurting each other and support our way out of it. Because two people,
Sure.
It's kind of that thing where humans have a great habit of, I think I might get hurt, so I'll strike first. And divorce is a bit like that. We suddenly become very territorial, and sometimes you do have to protect your assets, your goods, and stuff like that when you realise, But I've witnessed people offer an olive branch, and the other person, for fear of maybe actually losing some hate for the other person, reject it, and then down the line, like, the judge will say, but you were offered a really good deal. Well, you're not getting that. And it was just purely because I'm not accepting any kindness from that person. Whereas the other person was actually like, this isn't working. I think this is a fair deal. And they'll lay it out on the table up front. Because when that then gets rejected, they then, right, well, I'll dig my trench and die on my hill as well. And you just...
Being a positive person, I believe if you get married for the right reasons,
won't happen.
then generally you should be able to work through a marriage, because marriages have ups and downs. That's to be expected. And when the downs come, for better or worse, work through them. As long as both partners are open and want to make this work, it will work. And I think successful marriages are ones in which both partners continue to work on the marriage. For example, in my life, for 30 years of marriage, I've taken my wife on a date every Saturday night. Why? Because I'm so busy in my medical profession. If I didn't set a date, it wouldn't happen. And it's our tradition, and that's one way that we make our marriage work, because we each other and tell each other our dreams and all. So marriage takes work. A successful marriage takes work. And if people get married because they love each other, but don't want to, and I'm talking now more of the romantic lust love, it's probably not going to last.
No. Just lastly, because I'm conscious of time, and as I've always asked you my favourite question to ask at the end of every session, I've actually got a different question, but it's hypnosis related, or at least positive thinking related. How can people use their imagination for suggestions, and how can you teach your imagination to help yourself?
I'll answer that in one moment. I just want to amend my last comment about love. I said if you marry because you love each other, it's not going to last. What I meant is if you're married, is that the only reason you got married is because of lust/love, it's not going to last. If you have other reasons, then lust/love, of course, adds to a good marriage. So
definitely.
I want to make sure clear about that. So how can people make suggestions to help themselves? Well, this is an extension of the positive intention, positive talk. So your mind, when it's open, accepts suggestions from yourself or from other people. You can keep an open mind by first being aware that I'm ready to receive. And you can give yourself suggestions in the form of affirmations or wishes. I want to become smarter. I want to become faster. You can also give yourself suggestions with imagery. I will tell you, mankind used images before it used words. And so images are more primitive and can maybe penetrate deeper into the mind. So you want to become a star athlete, imagine being a star athlete. You can even pretend to be a star athlete in your sport, and that will improve you. There was a study during COVID of a basketball team who could not practice. And they told half the team to work out at home, told the other half to work out at home and imagine weightlifting.
Okay.
Imagine weightlifting. They brought them back 6 weeks later. The people who worked out at home, they had lost 4% of their strength. The people who worked out and imagined weightlifting gained 9% in strength. Huh?
Yeah. That
Imagining weightlifting.
I remember
That's how powerful.
I remember seeing somebody. I think he was a hostage. It was years ago. I remember reading about him. He was a hostage, and one of the things he did, he just kept imagining his favourite golf course, and he just played this over again and again, as if every day was a different day, and he was there at the golf course. And when he went back, he played one of his best ever games of golf. When he finally got released and went to play golf, he had one of the greatest successes, and he hadn't hit a golf ball for 5 years or something. You know, it's like, so yeah. How would somebody utilise that power of imagination to make suggestions to help themselves?
So, by thinking of the outcome you desire, thinking about it in words or imagery, you're giving yourself suggestions. Viktor Frankl talked about the people who survived the Holocaust, the ones who had hope. They imagined a better future. And so imagination is so powerful. You know, in small kids, we tell them fairy tales.
Yeah.
That engages their imagination. And it's, in fact, with young kids, that's how I do hypnosis. I tell them stories. Okay. And that's another way you can engage your imagination, by listening to an inspiring story or writing an inspiring story. So many ways that are not formal hypnosis, but they carry the same power. So to summarize, if you want to use your imagination and suggestions to improve your life, set your intention, positive talk, and tell yourself how you want to become and envision what that would look like. One time I worked with this, I usually don't work with adults, but this adult begged me to see her. She was like 40 years old. She had total body pain with some strange diagnosis. And I said to her, well, what will it be like when you get better? Not if, but when you get better. Suggestion. She said, get better? I never thought about that before. And I said, well, it's really important to be able to see how you'd like to be if you're ever going to get there. So that's the power of imagination.
And that's the perfect place to stop. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And there you go. That was the episode. And it was interesting, yeah, because we talked about that loving each other, expressing that fondness, that love for each other. It doesn't have to be romantic. It's just an expression that I do care. I don't want something to happen to you. And it's one of the reasons that when I do these little closing conversations and I offer a slight reflection, it's also the reason why I always do that bit at the end of wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. It's an expression of gratitude, an expression of love. It's an expression of appreciation. It's acknowledging that actually I do feel blessed and lucky to be able to do these podcasts, and I feel blessed and lucky that people listen. And so on that note, thank you very much. I do appreciate that you support me. I do appreciate that you listen, and I'm very grateful to you. So wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed.